I think we're good. Um, yep, it started recording. Let me know, are you gonna, let me see, do I need to give you permission
Share
to share
screen.
the screen?
I think I have it. It looks like oh no, I do need it actually.
Working on it. All right, try that now.
Yep, it works.
Perfect. Okay.
Great. Can you all see my screen? Wonderful. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for taking your lunchtime to spend a little bit of time with me today. I appreciate it. So I'm Emily Mulvihill. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Education, and I'll be presenting today on teaching with unconditional positive regard. And I'll be sharing some tips and tricks and things, but I really want this to be a session where we have the time together to kind of talk and share ideas. I don't like to be the sage on the stage. So please continue to, raise your hand, pop on the mic, share thoughts and insights within the chat box. And I'm definitely open to that. We'll try to monitor the chat box as well. So thank you to Karen and to Denise for the opportunity to present. And I'm excited to talk about this particular concept, something I haven't talked about before explicitly, something actually that I've talked kind of around, but a theme that comes up within the research I've done and other presentations that I've discussed. And so I figured, hey, why not? It'd be a great opportunity to share with the fellows. So hopefully we have a variety of experiences today. Maybe there are some that are very familiar with teaching with unconditional positive regard. Maybe there are some who have not even heard of the term, but it's actually something that I found out through my research and that Karen shared with me weeks ago now, that has been around for decades, really since the 50s and 60s. So we're actually going to start in that vein. I'm going to share a link with you to a Padlet, and I'd love for you to just take a minute to share your thoughts on what you know about unconditional positive regard, or what you think it might mean, given kind of just the language that we're using today. So I'm going to throw this link in the chat box. Feel free to click on it. I think I made it accessible to everyone. You should be able to add your comments. I will kind of shift over to Padlet if you've never used Padlet before and do a quick tutorial, but if you have, feel free to start right away. So I'm gonna stop sharing and then I'll share my next screen with you. Sometimes my computer does this thing where it doesn't share if I try to switch screens. So this is what the Padlet looks like. I see some of you already writing. You can see the bubbles at the top, but the title is just Unconditional Positive Regard. And I'd love for you to share what comes to mind when you hear the term unconditional positive regard. So there should be a big yellow plus button in the lower right-hand corner. You'll click it, and then you'll be able to click and add your thoughts, whether that's a subject, whether that's a picture, whether that's just, a text response, a visual. And then once you hit enter, I believe it should post to the wall, and we'll be able to share as a group what your thoughts are. So I'll give you a minute to do that. I'm going to mute my email in the meantime. I love the responses that are already coming through. And then we'll kind of debrief together as we get started. So go ahead and take a minute to do that, and I'll stop sharing momentarily. And feel free to add your name or keep yourself anonymous. That's fine as well. It's really up to you. I may call on you if you feel comfortable coming forward to share your thoughts. That's great. Looks like we have a range of experiences too. Be about another 30 seconds or so to add to the Padlet. Mhm. Okay. So I see I have a really neat picture here. I assume this is a picture of one of the founders of the term or the theory behind unconditional positive regard. So if you posted the
Yes,
picture,
that's Carl Rogers.
there you go. Thanks, Karen. I like the I don't know if I can click on this too. There we go. Go back. I like the sketch, like artistic nature of it too. It's not just a traditional photograph. That's really neat. So Carl Rogers, I wasn't aware what he looked like. So now we know. Thanks, Karen, for that. And someone added Kate Denial's pedagogy of kindness. So I don't know if anyone wants to speak to how that links into the term unconditional positive regard.
So that was me. So I've only heard this term unconditional positive regard, like I think a few months ago, but I've definitely been doing it. And I think I probably first encountered this whole idea from a blog post by Kate Denial about the pedagogy of kindness. She's got a book that's coming out this summer called Pedagogy of Kindness, but I think it's probably the same thing in different words.
Yeah, and I have some references at the end of my slide. I started learning more about the term, not from Carl Rogers, unfortunately, and I have to be honest, I haven't delved into the theory behind Carl Rogers's work or the humanistic theory, which someone noted on the Padlet, but I would like to further. My experience with it is sort of like Rachel's, where it came from a podcast I'd actually listened to, and Alex Vinette's work, which I reference on that references slide if you're interested. And she talks about trauma awareness and linking unconditional positive regard into supporting students and what that looks like. So my hope is that we can define this term as a group, learn a little bit more about it, maybe whet your appetite to learn more about Kate Denial's pedagogy of kindness or Carl Rogers' humanistic theory, and then from there be able to think about how this applies to our work with students and come up with a little bit of an action plan, which we won't have time to do today necessarily, but maybe independently. So some of you mentioned some of the things I just talked about. It's a new term for one of us. I suspect it means treating others positively and reinforcing positivity, but unconditionally. Yep, you got it. Believing students have the best intentions and have the ability to learn, sometimes just in different ways, and keeping that learning process and that diversity of how we learn in mind, I think is important. So we'll talk about that, definitely. Someone said not sure, which is great too. Like I said, levels of different experience with Carl Rogers's work, always encouraging students, separating the person from the behaviors. I love that because I really think that is at the heart of what we're going to talk about today. It goes back to what unconditional means, right? So separating the person from their behaviors and really thinking about their worth and seeing them for who they are. So these are great. Thank you all so much. Anyone want to add anything about what they wrote or thoughts on the term before we jump in? Great. Well, if you think of something, let me know. I'm going to close that out and I'll share my PowerPoint again. Hopefully you can see it. Whenever I present on this computer, just as a side note, it doesn't allow me to access my notes. So I apologize that it's not in presenter view. I've tried a few different things, but it hasn't worked. So hopefully you're okay seeing some of my notes at the bottom of the presentation. So appreciate your flexibility with that. But you all are exactly right. And I thought this was a great quote to begin with. It's Alex Vinette's book, as I mentioned, and I first heard her speaking on the cult of pedagogy. If you've never heard of it, it's a website, it's a blog, it's cited here at the bottom of this actual quote. It's also a podcast, and so you can access it in a variety of different ways, and she was featured as an author speaking about trauma awareness, and she integrates, like I said, into her book, this concept of unconditional positive regard. So taking all of what you just mentioned on the Padlet, which you're, again, welcome to revisit or add to later on, this is a really great definition that I think breaks it down for us. So essentially, it means a lot of what you all said kind of put together. It means when you are working with a student or just a person of value that you interact with, they're saying to them, in the way that you choose to interact, I care about you, you have value, and you don't have to do anything to prove it to me. and nothing will change my mind. And I love how they highlight those key nothing will change my mind and other concepts throughout the quote in orange. It's seeing someone as a whole and complete worthy person, starting from a place where care doesn't have to be earned. So a student walks in your door and they have value immediately. You care about them immediately. They don't have to do anything to prove it. And anything they do within the classroom space won't change your mind. It also gives students the ability to make mistakes. So you're allowed to mess up, you're allowed to have struggles, but it's not going to change that original, as you walked in the door, you have that value. You don't have to prove it. Nothing will change my mind. That is not going to invalidate my care for you if you make mistakes or if you mess up or if you have struggles. So thinking about this within the teaching lens and how we can use this approach with our students, even on challenging days. So I'm going to go over a couple of benefits and some things of specific examples about what positive regard could look like. And then we're going to talk and maybe break out. We'll see if we have time for that today. But the benefits of this type of approach with students are shown within the research in Carl Rogers's work as well. Students are able to establish self-confidence and self-worth. Imagine if you walked in the door and you had a teacher or a professor back during your schooling days who just got it and saw you, and you knew that you were safe and that you didn't have to do anything to prove your worth within that classroom space. It would really feel good, right? And that self-confidence would be built. And you'd also be able to build trust as an educator with your students because of that initial foundation that was set. And so relationships that children built and then older students as well can really be applied in this series. So it's not just an elementary or high school piece of things. We can do this with our college students, undergraduate, graduate students. So there are some students who walk in the door who have a lack of confidence or poor self-image, and unconditional positive regard can effectively help these students build up their confidence. Because they have that established space that is nurturing and accepts them for who they are. The second benefit is students can gain motivation, or third benefit is students can gain motivation and work toward their goals. So if they're not worried about how they might be seen or what the response might be to what their contribution is in the classroom, students can trust that they will feel safe and they're enabled to then go after their goals. It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy. So if that foundation of safety and value is already there, then they can reach the higher pieces of the hierarchy or the pyramid, because then they don't have to be concerned about repercussions for failure. Instead, the positive reinforcement allows them to move forward. It fosters that environment which they're motivated to grow, mistakes are accepted, and then they can succeed too. And then finally, unconditional positive regard is linked to classroom achievement because of the pieces I talked about. It's that trust, it's they're gaining motivation, they're seeing others make mistakes and seeing that they're accepted for it, they're feeling safe, they're building their self-confidence. So a lot of this is very intuitive, but if we can implement it in the different ways that we're going to talk about, I think we'll see our students succeed, and that we'll grow in our deeper relationships with them too. So I'd love to know your thoughts. For those of you that have used this approach, or maybe like Rachel was saying, unknowingly use this approach, which was probably definitely me before I learned the term to kind of label it. What does unconditional positive regard look like? I have a few ideas on the screen, but what does it look like for you in your classroom, or how have you used this concept? If you'd be willing to share, you can write in the chat box or jump on the mic.
Well, I'll jump in if nobody else is going to, but
Thank
then
you.
y'all can jump ahead of me. That's fine. No, in the Honors 101 class, I think one thing that's been a lot of fun for me, but then I see the positive results of it. A lot of it is self-reflection, and we're working on resumes and biographies and, sort of personal documents, that become professional documents is the way I describe it to students. But I've been able to set that up that really all I'm doing, and I didn't really intend to do this, it's just how it evolved. And then I saw the positivity of it. It was, I just go in and add positive comments, and have kind of found that's sort of the goal, is just try to, as I'm reading a student's biography or their other materials offer some corrections if there's grammar to correct or something, but mostly I've just made it a goal, try to add positive comments and really help them see what I see as positive about themselves. And that's been a lot of fun for me and just rewarding. But then I've seen what that does for students, and like I said, I didn't start out, this is how I'm going to do this class. It's just what evolved, but then I've seen the power of that. So it's cool.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're setting a foundation for what could be a positive culture and then building on that and making students see that feedback can be not only critical feedback for improvement, which isn't bad either, but that there's a lot of value in what they've already given you as an assignment. And sometimes I can imagine it would be nerve-wracking to give an assignment to a professor who you feel isn't going to say anything positive or note your efforts. So the fact that you're doing that, I think in addition to the critical piece of things is really good. Yeah, so Calico, do you mind? She wrote in the chat box, student-centered, meeting them where they are. A lot of the tips I have on here are very general. So like get to know your students, build relationships, offer a safe space. Great. What does that look like? So for you, Calico, what does student-centered mean? How do you meet them where they are? Do you use some of these things on the screen or do you use a different approach?
I think I try to start off by going over the syllabus with them and letting them know in an email beforehand, like that I'd like to get to know them better, that I'm interested in helping them be successful. Then once they're in class, like saying, I'm going to shoot out the syllabus in Blackboard before we start, but the first day we'll go over everything and I want your input and I want to know where you guys are and what you're thinking about everything, so that they really are like helping in essence to build the class and kind of giving me the feedback. Another thing that I really I love to do with students before they've ever worked with me, is I'll let them know communication is key for me, but then I ask them, what are your expectations for me as your professor? And I think a lot of them go like, what? But I love doing that because I tell them like, I also need a rubric. Like I need to know, how do I measure up to what you're needing and wanting from this class? And I think that really makes them feel a lot more safe too.
Yeah, I love that. And, we could teach probably a half a semester, a full semester course on this topic because there's so many kind of sub themes around it. So I love that you said, Calico, too, the idea behind this being a two-way relationship and maybe building that community that Christine mentioned in the chat box too, together. And maybe there's some norms that are set up or a classroom contract. But you touched on a lot of things, Calico, and I want to mention that Calico also highlighted the building of relationships from the beginning to the end of the semester, spending time getting to know students one-on-one, and then maybe the norms and that piece of having that expectation go both ways plays into offering that safe space. That's great. Thank you. Carol Faust said using positive body language, listening, asking questions, and I kicking myself now because I'm like, oh, I should have put active listening on this list. But it's so hard in today's world, and I'm guilty of it too, to be present with another person, let alone a student, because you have a bunch of different things as professors that we're kind of juggling, and as staff members too, if someone comes into your office. And so to really spend the time to learn a little bit more about what it means to be an active listener and be aware of our body language, I think, especially when we're in person, even on Zoom, regulating that so that we're able to build those connections and that the student feels heard and seen. That's fantastic. Thank you.
I think it's really important to kind of break the ice early on. Like I try to just, even on the first day, go up to I get there early, and as students come in, I try to go up and just talk to them, just introduce myself, talk to them, ask them a couple of questions, because I think right then you're just setting up that first experience for them where they see that you're approachable, you're a human being, you care, you are interested in them, learning to pronounce their name if it's maybe a little bit more challenging, or just looking them in the eye, saying that I'm really glad that they're in the class. I look forward to working with them, things like that, I think make a difference. And then students aren't so reticent to maybe come up even just after class and talk to you or come to your office because they see you as a positive, kind of kind, friendly person, a real person like you have on the, real genuine. And then if they do come to talk to you, really taking the time to set everything aside. I struggle with this a little bit myself because, I'm like doing things, I'll be like, yeah, what do you need? But I tell the students, if you ever come in to see me and I'm like looking at my screen or whatever, just say like, hey, Dr. Faust, I need your attention. And, I think that's really important because I want to give people my full attention and really look at them, really listen, really hear what they're saying. And so many times people just need to be heard. They just need to be heard. So I just think there's a lot of things. And even if it's not in your personality, I mean, I tend to be a very open and friendly and accommodating person, but even if it's not in your personality, I think it's important to make that effort within your own boundaries, obviously still being yourself and being genuine, but to make that little bit of effort, and just like I have to make effort to hold boundaries, I have to make effort to, do those kinds of things. I think we all have to make that effort for being a genuine, positive regard person.
Yeah, I love that. No, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Dr. Faust, because this will look different for many of us. We're all different, unique people who also deserve to be seen and treated with unconditional positive regard, but it doesn't have to look the same. So think about the kind of learner center practices that are on the screen and what Dr. Faust said. And if you struggle with this a bit, maybe starting small and thinking about how can I implement these things so it is authentic to me and that genuineness is met, but that I'm still acting within where I feel comfortable in those boundaries that Dr. Faust mentioned too. And a lot of us have talked about in-person interactions, which are ideal, but I'm curious, I actually teach all adult learners who are working full-time and balancing lots of personal life demands. How have those of you who are online like I am, how do you build these relationships and how do you act with unconditional positive regard if you don't have the chance to get to see your students face to face? Any thoughts or tips around that?
I found it really useful when I have grad students online to have one-on-one meetings with them like regularly. I mean, if I have regular one-on-one meetings with them, it really helps.
I
So
think so too. I do the same thing, Christine.
yeah. So that's kind of how I do it. And then I can't do this asynchronized. I have to have them meet and talk to each other. I think that's half the benefit because they're all struggling, with their jobs, the alternative licensing people especially. And so by talking to each other and then having me, who's like the expert, give them a little bit of feedback and telling them they're doing a good job, then they hear from others too. I mean, so that's how I do it. I can't do it asynchronously. I don't know. Does anybody else know how to do it asynchronistically? Discussion boards, I don't know. I think they're that effective for that.
Yeah, I teach online asynchronously and synchronously, and I think the list of things that I do to kind of build that trust and build relationships is extremely long. I think one of them is just making sure students know that if they need more time or support, I don't need excuses for that. I will just believe them if they say that they need more time or need more support. They don't need to send me obituaries or doctor's notes.
Yeah.
And so I think just modeling trust in them makes them feel a lot more comfortable with me.
Yeah, that's a great point. It links into that last block at the bottom of the screen, the empathetic understanding, Rachel. And I'm totally in agreement with what you mentioned too, Christine, but acknowledging that struggle, expressing gratitude, being supportive and encouraging, or just asking, what do you need right now? Or how are you today? I think those are some more simple practices that we can put into play right away. And Max said in the chat box, I didn't mean to wait a minute, Max, but you had some great points. You said memorizing all of the students' names early in the semester, using someone's actual name, research evidence-based for those of us that are kind of the data geeks, that resonates and it matters to people to actually learn their name and to use it. And then reiterate that throughout the semester. the importance of citing in their article, student-centered learning. Great. And I agree, Max, for sure. David mentioned using the high flex model in each course that he teaches. He had one asynchronous student create a video. Do you want to speak to this at all, David? I don't know if I'll do it justice.
Sure, and I'm hardly perfect on this because I didn't keep it up throughout the entire semester as I intended to, but in the honors class, we have asynchronous participants. And so I offered one student the opportunity to record her reflections as a video, and we just watched it in the subsequent class, and it was amazing how that, and then students could respond to that in class, and she could follow up watching the Zoom. And then the next semester, at the end of the semester, she actually got to come to one class live, and and we all knew her. I mean, it was neat, you know. So anyway, it was cool.
That's really neat. I love
Fan of
that.
Flipgrid's a little. I've run into some issues trying to get Flipgrid to work sometimes, so we just did it with putting the Google link.
Okay. That's neat. I haven't done high flex. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to hop in terms of like building rapport and positive regard with online classes. So this semester I'm teaching 3 completely online classes, and it is hard to build that. So one of the things that I do is I post a video every week. Even before the class starts, I post, hey, here's what we're doing, here's this, but it really sets that stage for, hey, come to me. One of the first things I say is, you're doing this online, but you're not alone. It's not just one thing. So each week is a new video of, hey, this is what I saw. This was great. This was wonderful. Hey, here's some other resources that really just helps them, the students, to see, again, they're not struggling alone. There are more resources if they kind of had an issue with something, maybe others did too. So that video is a way to engage. So I think, Christine, when you're saying I can't do the discussion boards, yeah, they're probably not the most ideal, but I think a video really helps. It's one-sided, but it really says, like, come see me, because I can type in there, hey, come see me during office hours, just on an announcement. But if I'm saying a video like, hey, please come see me, it definitely conveys a different enthusiasm and excitement for them versus just seeing it in text. And I think that really helps a lot with the online students.
I love that. So just thank you, Jamie, using what is at your disposal and trying different things, it sounds like, to engage different students and not just using kind of the same old thing. I've done audio for feedback for assignments as well, and or video, and that seems to be really effective for students. But I like the idea of, that's what I try at the beginning of semester, as Christine mentioned too, doing those one-to-one meetings and kind of putting a voice with a name. And it sounds like that's what you're saying also, Jamie. Because it can be an impersonal environment sometimes, unfortunately, if we're doing solely asynchronous, and sometimes that just is what it is. So we have to get creative. Okay, so let me see. I think there might be one other slide that I could combine with this one. Perhaps not. But one quote I'd like from Alex Vinette's book is that out of the 2 of us, one of us had to take the leap of faith. So sometimes we have challenges, which we'll talk about in a minute. And she's the kid, so it had to be me. So Alex Vinette is talking about a K-12 environment when you're working with minors, even though we work with adults. I'm the teacher, so it has to be me. So when you have a student who is reluctant to potentially respond to efforts to build a relationship or reach out, like Jamie mentioned, what have you done, or what might you try within the lens of unconditional positive regard? Anyone want to share how they've bridged the gap to meet more challenging students, or maybe the students who are less apt to come forward?
I can speak to that. One of the things that I do is I really try to encourage them to just come to my office, and where we can sit one-on-one and talk. Especially students, maybe they don't want to share their struggles in front of the whole class, which I do have a lot of students sometimes that are shy or embarrassed, maybe feel ashamed that they don't know what they're doing. Like you talked about earlier, this lack of confidence. And so I've had a lot of success with some of those students where I just, email them and I can set appointments. I try to find time outside my office hours. And so I've had a lot of success with some students when they come to my office and I can just sit with them, hear what they have to say and their struggles. And then, do my best to try to help them succeed. So that's one thing that I do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said, Max. Thank you for that face-to-face piece of things, but also just trying to put in a little bit extra effort that they know, and you've made it clear that you want them to succeed and that you're willing to be flexible with your schedule or give them grace and offer to meet with them if they need it. And sometimes videos can help with that, or that initial phone call of kind of breaking the ice to be able to open the door to maybe in-person meetings too. David said, sometimes I run a mental checklist after a few weeks of, I do the same thing, who I've connected with or who I've not connected with, and then reach out to check up on them. Or if someone's struggling at the beginning, I'll make a note, okay, 2 weeks from now, I need to check in on them. Exactly. I agree with that piece of things. Okay, I want to honor everyone's time today. So I don't know if we have time for the rest of the piece of things I had planned, but I wanted to highlight a few more things, and maybe we have time to talk about one more topic within unconditional positive regard. But I also really like this quote. Alex Vinette says, if we commit to an ethic of care, building relationships and caring for our students aren't strategies in the name of increasing academic achievement, but the actual goal itself. So we're actually, through this approach, it just gives me goosebumps, fundamentally changing the goal itself. And the goal doesn't become academic achievement. It becomes committing to an ethic of care that will then lead to that academic achievement through the strategies that we use under the lens of unconditional positive regard. So it can be incredibly powerful to shift your practices, to maybe edit and revise a little bit of what you're doing, and then potentially to just start this approach all over. Did someone want to jump in? I'm sorry. Thought I heard someone on the mic. Okay, so we don't have time for breakout rooms, but maybe just a brief share out in the chat and or mic like we've been doing. Think about how you would respond differently if you knew your students' behavior was not a choice. Oftentimes we go immediately to, well, they're choosing to act like this. And, they're impacting the class because of their choices. If we knew that their behavior was not a choice and we treated them with unconditional positive regard, how would you respond differently? Another 2 questions you could consider: what does it look like to use an unconditional positive regard for undergraduates versus graduates versus maybe a K-12 environment? And then we already talked about the third question, but online. So anyone want to comment on maybe one of the first 2 questions at the top there?
I think it's always important to recognize that we don't know what people are dealing with. And we might not ever know, but I think just giving people the benefit of the doubt and having positive regard, it doesn't mean that we don't hold boundaries. It doesn't mean that there's not standards or, whatever. I think sometimes people think, oh, well, if you're nice, you're just going to let people get away with too much. Well, no, that's not true. You can have positive regard, treat people very respectfully and kindly, and positively, but still really encourage them and help them to reach their potential, and listen to what's going on. But you might not ever know what their situation is. So to me, I know that a lot of times I've been in situations where I've just got hellish things happening. And I know nobody knows that. Nobody I'm dealing with knows that. And so I try to be as positive as possible, but I'm really, really grateful when someone gives me a break, has some positive regard for me. So I try to do the same for others. So sometimes they'll share it with you and sometimes they won't.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, Carol, and something that, again, if we had a whole semester or hours together, we could kind of break all of these pieces down of how do you treat people and students in this manner of having positive regard and giving grace and whatnot when you're having a bad day, when when their behavior isn't great and it's very challenging? And how do you still hold those expectations and boundaries that we all have within the university and our coursework, while still giving support and being kind? And I think it's different for every situation, and it's striking a balance can be challenging too. And language matters. Jamie mentioned this. So our interaction with students and with those colleagues that we work with, she switched a word on her syllabi to use student hours instead of office hours, kind of changing the language around, or the stigma around, what students may have learned, she said, in high school instead. And so how do we maybe shift what could have been a negative reaction to a positive one by using specific language? And so there's a lot around this research and this theory that can be continued to be discussed. Anyone else want to jump in?
Hey, I wanted to say that I played a game with my 100 level class last week, and it was called Poop Happens. And they had to like walk their blindfolded partner through like this field of all kind of stuff laying there. And that was all the stuff that stood between them and graduation, stuff that comes up. And, you know, and I think that helped them a lot. And I think, you know, just treating everybody like they're doing the best they can right this minute, because really, I think we all are.
Yeah. I love that you integrated humor. Like, it's okay to laugh. It's okay to smile. It's okay to have fun together too. So that's awesome. They probably loved that. Okay, so there's more that I would love, like I said, to talk about today. Maybe we'll do a part 2, but I'd like you to take 2 kind of takeaways from our session and time today. Feel free, I'll throw my email in the chat box too if you'd like to follow up with me to talk about this further. You're like, hey, I came across this really great article. I would love to continue the conversation with you too. But think about, now that we've set the foundation for what unconditional positive regard is, some of the best practices that we're using with students and our colleagues, maybe what challenges you anticipate with the approach, how you might overcome them, because nothing is ever smooth and linear, as Christine just said with her example with students, which I loved. And then maybe if you are open to integrating this as an approach in your courses with students, create a plan. Maybe take some time to think about how you'll implement an unconditional positive regard this semester, or maybe in the summer or the fall, or if you're already utilizing it, revising and refining your practices. It could be a list, a concrete action plan, looser ideas, and then feel free to share on the Padlet. I'll keep that up for everyone, or you can email me with it too. And then here I have the book I mentioned, Alex Vinette's Equity Center Trauma Informed Education, which I'm so grateful for Karen recommending to us, or to me actually, and for looking into a little bit more deeply to learn more about unconditional positive regard. So any final thoughts or questions, comments?
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you all for participating and for your time too. I know it's busy, but it makes it so much more fun to have that input. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Emily. That was great.
Oh yeah, thank you,
Great
Dr.
reminders.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great day. Dr. Yeskovich, should I stick around?
Sure.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stick around with me. Thank you all.
All right. I'm gonna
Monday.
cut the
Emily.
recording off. Thank you. everyone.
Bye.